What is going on to all my winning time fans out there, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. Elliot back again, breaking down episode 7, which was titled Invisible Man, an episode in which we see our Lakers taking a road trip to the Boston Garden. And you know what that means, Magic versus Bird. We're going to break that down and so much more in tonight's spoiler review. But before we get into tonight's discussion, make sure you're checking me out on all my other social media accounts. If you all are new to the channel and love early movie reviews, TV breakdowns, and live streams, well, come and join the community today by subscribing and hitting that notification bell. And as you all can see on the screen now, if you enjoyed tonight's discussion of episode 7 of Winning Time, well, make sure you're liking this review and also sharing it. But more importantly, in the comments below, let me know your favorite moments, least favorite moments, your thoughts on the rivalry between the Boston Celtics and the Lakers, but more particularly, what you think about Larry Bird. And let's talk about the theme of Invisible Man, whether it's Jack and his belief in Paul. Speaking of belief, Pat Riley stepping up as an assistant coach. And let's talk about Magic and him kind of having some inner turmoil with who he is as a black man and all the different stuff that we got in tonight's episode. Let's discuss that in the comment section, giving you all my initial impressions. As a basketball fan, I love this episode because as a lifetime Lakers fan, oh yeah, I know about them Boston Celtics and my hatred towards them, but also my respect for that organization. This is one of the best rivalries in sports across the board. I mean, maybe the closest one to that is the Yankees versus the Boston Red Sox, but Lakers and Celtics, Magic and Bird, all that stuff that we got there, I really enjoyed that narrative, especially the superstition going on in the Boston Garden. But more particularly, it's the Invisible Man narrative that we got in this episode that I really enjoyed. So overall, as a basketball fan, I do have some criticisms with some of the basketball play and also some of the more dramatic elements, but overall, this was yet another fantastic episode. Let me know your first impressions in the comments below. Let's get into tonight's breakdown as we open up with a game of chance as Buzz talks about Monopoly, and it does take some skill, but it also takes a little bit of luck and a little bit of chance. And right now, when it comes to the game of life, he's not winning at it because we see that the bank is still wanting their $3 million. We know what's going on with Jack and his accident, but also as we got last week when it comes to his mother's health, we get the diagnosis that she is diagnosed with cancer. So I really love this theme and this narrative in this opening sequence because it's in this moment where we cut to him saying, now luck cuts both ways. All the stuff he's going through, it's just a matter of time when it turns around and he's due for a good chance of luck. So I really enjoy that, just taking myself away from the episode and looking at life as a whole. We have our ups, we have our downs, and when we're at our downs, we just got to remember the lights at the end of the tunnel. You know, we just got to push through, keep our heads up, and fight through whatever that storm is. So I really enjoyed that narrative and that message that the opening sequence has to offer, which brings us into 6 weeks after that accident as our team has faced a string of ups and downs. And right now, Paul can't tell the difference between his head and his ass, and he does not even know what he's doing right now as a coach, which I'm not going to lie, here's where some of my criticism comes in. I think it was a little bit oversold because this isn't his first rodeo. Now, I know this is his first time as a head coach, especially of the Los Angeles Lakers, but he's coached basketball many, many times. So him dropping the clipboard, having Pat Riley having to suggest that he has one more timeout and it's an intentional foul, not knowing that his players has 6 fouls. Again, I know it's a lot on his plate, but at the end of the day, fundamentally, this is the game of basketball. He still knows the X's and O's. So I have to remember that this is a TV show and they have to dramatize, oversell things. So I got the point of the message there. Like he's just over his head right now, but I thought it was just a little overcooked for my personal taste. But let me know your thoughts on that as we transition to the team is treating Paul right now like a substitute teacher as they're coaching themselves. And this is where we see Jerry West points out, it's now or never. We don't know what's going on with Jack's health. His health is in the air right now. We have a legend right now who is wanting to coach a team in Elgin Baylor. And it's, if you want to win this season, Dr. Bus, like I said, it's now or never. You got to make a decision or you can kiss this season goodbye, which also you can kiss a championship goodbye, and you can kiss that money that you owe the bank goodbye. So the pressure is on. The ticking time bomb has begun as we go to our next moments here as Jack is determined to come back back, and he believes that he is a Lakers coach, but he more importantly believes that his man Paul can weather the storm for maybe a month, maybe 2 max. He's very determined to come back, and he just wants Dr. Bus to just give me a little bit more time. We're going to talk about how that comes back towards the end of this episode, as we see Paul is getting the news from Jack in regards to the conversation that he just had with Dr. Bus. And again, the pressure's on. So Paul takes it upon himself to say, you know what? I need help, and I need Pat Riley's help. I really, really enjoyed Pat Riley, and particularly Adrian Brody and his portrayal as Pat Riley, having that sense of optimism in this episode, because he has some stuff on the line too. He's been his own invisible man these last few 5 episodes, or 6 episodes up to this point, and he has the decision, and he agrees to be the assistant coach, but it means that he's going to quit his commentary game. And what happens when Paul comes back? Will Pat have a job? That's a question at hand. I really enjoyed that aspect there. As we go to, as a basketball fan here, Larry Bird versus Magic Johnson, the hype around it, the media questioning Magic Johnson at this point as they're going on the road to play the Detroit Pistons, to play the Pacers, but more particularly play the Boston Celtics. I really enjoyed how they just created that narrative because, again, as a basketball fan, and you all know if you're a basketball fan, especially if you're a Lakers fan or a Celtics fan, that rivalry was no joke. That was one of the most serious rivalries that we've ever seen in sports. 2 of the greatest athletes of all time in regards to Larry Bird arguably being one of the best small forwards to ever play the game. I know people have LeBron up there and have some other legends, but you know, Larry's pretty high up there if you ask me. And of course, we know Magic Johnson is, in my opinion, the greatest point guard of all time. So I enjoyed how the show created that narrative, how the media hyped things up, how Magic had to kind of play coy, how Larry Bird was all about the business. That stuff was really fascinating to me. Let me know what you all thought about that. As we see Magic and the Lakers have arrived in their home, as I should say, Magic's home in Detroit, and I really had a fun time when he's walking down the hallway and we get the young lady that lifts her shirt up and says Larry Bird on there. That was very funny to me. But going back to me enjoying Pat Riley in this episode, I have to call out that moment because I thought it was so nice when he, as far as like the realism of being a coach and the controversy in the locker room, especially when there's beef between a coach and a player. We all know what's going on with Paul, what's going on with Spencer, and Paul addressing that I effed up. I made a mistake. I let my ego get in the way, and I have to fix it, which he does a little bit later in the episode. But it's those moments there, as like I mentioned, as a basketball fan, this was a great episode because it touched on, again, a relationship between a player and a coach and how the tension can create some turmoil within the locker room. I really appreciate that scene there. Magic home tour continues as he has a moment to spend some time with Cookie in this episode, which they do spend some time with in this particular moment where we see him, you know, the businessman Magic, but he wants to built that relationship with Cookie, which I really had it. I thought it was very fascinating that when we spent time with Cookie in this episode, she didn't want that ring. She didn't want to have that marriage right away, but she knew that she had, you know, magic wrapped around her finger, but it's all the rumors that she's starting to hear as far as road games and Magic sleeping with women on the road, and she's just having some doubts. Is this the man that I want to be with? Is this a life I want to live? As they have a moment and she addresses him and she confronts him and he, you know, assures her, you're the only woman that I have eyes for. And then 2 seconds later, as the camera pans, my man Magic just slept with her best friend. I am very excited that we got the announcement for season 2 because if you all don't know, they do get married, but it happens much later down the road and it happens in a very particular time of his life. So I'm very excited to explore their relationship. But let me know what you all thought of that moment as we transition to, unfortunately, the road game and going against the Pistons does not work out for the Lakers as they lose to the worst team in the league. And this is where the pressure's on because you know who the next game is against. It is the Boston Celtics. And I really appreciate, again, the optimism that Pat Riley had in this episode. We got to stay focused. We got to come up with a game plan. And there's a scene that I'm going to talk about here in a second that just won me over. It's one of my favorite scenes of the show so far. But as the urban legend is coming about the Celtics in the Boston Garden, as Norm is talking about, there's just like a aura, there's a presence there, there's a leprechaun that is on the premises of the court. I, again, as a sports, as an athlete myself, superstition is a very much a real thing, and especially I've never been to the Boston Garden. You know, being from Chicago, I've watched the Lakers come play the Bulls, but I've never been to the Boston Garden. I would have loved to have seen or go to a Boston game, because you can just tell there are just certain arenas that you can just watch on TV that there's something different about this arena, right? There's something superstitious about this arena, and I really enjoyed that narrative that they create around the aura in the place that they call the Boston Garden. Let me know what you all thought about that, especially if you're a basketball fan, as we transition to the next conversation at hand. And I really appreciate this conversation between Magic Johnson's father and Kareem, and the conversation that Kareem brings up, like, listen, I appreciate your son's optimism, his joy, but I ain't really never seen no black man act like him, especially in this position of power. And what's going on in the world right now, we don't need some happy-going, smiley, happy black man. We need someone that's here for the cause and knows that there's a struggle out there, and America isn't the best place in regards to, you know, racism and discrimination. So the conversation that Magic dad has with him and brings up, you know what? I need you to look out for my son. If need be, I need you to kick his ass to really wake him up. And again, not literally kicking his ass, but just letting him know there's bigger things at hand. It's not just about the basketball, the girls, the glitz, the glamour. You're a black man in a position of power, and you have to kind of, you not necessarily have to be, you know, fighting for the cause 24/7, but you got to know what you stand for, and that you are very aware of all the discrimination and all the racism and all the things that are going on during this time, and you have to stand for more than what is just the game of basketball. So I really appreciate what Kareem's character is bringing to the show and the narrative that they're having with that character. One of my favorite moments of the episode. What you all think about that? As we move on to yet another fantastic scene, as it's followed up with, we get the call from Pat Riley seeing that Elgin Baylor is on his way to Boston, and he is played by Orlando Jones, who I'm a fan of him back in his Mad TV days, and he's also just a great stand-up comedian, just a great actor overall. As we see again, Pat's realizing, all right, we got to make a decision, and he asks Paul, like, wait, did you know about this? He puts him in that cold shower, and he makes Paul finally stand up. Do you want to be the coach? Yes, I do. Well, make the call. Stand up for yourself. As Pat, you know, the good old classic Pat Riley look as he puts his hair back. That moment to me was one of my favorite scenes of not only this episode, but definitely one of my favorite scenes of this entire series so far. I love the optimism. I love that Pat Riley pushes the limits, pushes his buttons, makes him stand up for himself. He's no longer an invisible man, and I really enjoyed that. What did you all think about the Pat Riley scene? Let's have a discussion in the comments. Moving on to a moment that I really enjoyed, and that is Welcome to Boston. Blood on the walls. We got rats crawling on the ground, but leave it to Red. He gives Dr. Bust the worst seats in the house. What a great moment there. I had a good laugh in that moment, but it's time to actually play some basketball, ladies and gentlemen. And I gotta say, when it comes to Larry Bird, I believe the actor name is Sean Patrick Small. The aura around the rivalry and the beef between Magic was there, but I wasn't sold on Sean as Larry Bird. I hope we get more of him. Season 2, or obviously the rest of the season, but I just wasn't sold in his performance. He was just a little bit too, like, he was in his, like, to me, he seemed like he was in his head, like, I have to play Larry Bird like this character. It just didn't fully work for me as an actor. Again, hopefully he has more room to grow in a role. What did you all think about Sean Patrick Small in the role, and how did you perceive the rivalry between Magic and Larry? Let's talk about that in the comment section. But moving back to a more serious side, as we see that Magic and Kareem are having that discussion. Again, the conflict that Magic has as a black man. Hey man, I gotta have this persona. I gotta show these white folks that I am, you know, a different type of guy, a different type of black athlete. And I love that moment, but I'm not gonna lie. Here's another criticism. I mentioned it last week when he had the scene with Sydney. I think Quincy Isaiah does a good job of playing the role of Magic from the persona, the happy-going, you know, cheering type of individual. But when he has the more serious moments, the more, like, you know, serious, dramatic monologues, he hasn't sold me in the seriousness. It might just be me, but I'm just not buying him on that serious side. But I love the you know, the charisma and the charm that he has, but the seriousness isn't working for me. But let's wrap up to one of the more maybe critical moments that I have in the episode, and it's time to play some basketball. As we see, the game plan at hand is to trap Larry Bird, move the ball, obviously, and the things are working so far. Second quarter, they're winning the basketball game, but things turn as the referees are now starting to, not make the calls. We get to see some of that physicality that was in that time of basketball, which, obviously the way the game is played now is so dramatically different from what it was played back then. But we start to see the tables are turning. The game of luck is starting to go to the Lakers' favor as we see Pat Riley takes one for the team. He takes a tee. He gets himself thrown out, and that ignites Paul to step up as a coach to get the team going as they're starting to get, he brings in Spencer. He makes up for his mistake. He brings in Spencer into the lineup to close out the game. They're moving the ball. They're playing some great D. Brings us to the fourth quarter. They're down one. And again, like they did a couple episodes ago of the first season of the game, they switched it up as far as like what actually happened. Now, they won the game. That is true, but it wasn't, based on Michael Cooper hitting the game winner. It was actually Norm that hit free throws, so not as dramatic as it was in this show, but nonetheless, they win the game. Paul wins the game, which brings us to the last scene. Dr. Buss pays a visit to Jack, and he says, you know what? Do you think that Paul can be the coach of the Lakers and win the championship? He says no. But then Dr. Buss turns around. It's all about taking a chance. There's still more game to play, and he's going to allow Paul to continue to be the intern until Jack gets his health back up and going. So really good stuff in this episode, again, from the Magic Johnson confronting himself as a black man, the conversation with Kareem and his dad, as far as Magic Johnson's dad, the buildup of Magic versus Bird, the buildup of the Lakers versus Celtics, the superstition around the Boston Garden, that stuff worked. I wasn't completely sold on the portrayal of Larry Bird, even though I did like that moment when he was actually playing basketball and told them what he was going to do next. But hopefully that actor, Sean, grows on me in the role, and I hope that Quincy can hit me more in the emotional beats. And some of the basketball stuff was a little sketchy with the CGI and all that, but overall, the meat and the emotion in the episode was there for me. So that's just my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments. Pros, cons, favorite moments, things that didn't work for you all. Let's have that discussion in the comment section. If you stuck around to this point in the review, I appreciate you all. Before you leave, make sure you like the video, share the video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and of course, subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell. That way you don't miss any of my future reviews. As you can see on the screen now, hope you had a great day. Hope you're having a great day. Hope you're staying safe. Subscribe to the channel. Check out my other content. We'll catch you on the next video.